There is much more excitement from the World Cup in Baku, and we are going to have a look at a game played in the tiebreaks of the second round. It's the game between Arjun Erigaisi from India, one of the rising stars rated over 2700, and he's playing against experienced grandmaster Sergei Azarov, rated close to 2600, and it's a very tight match, and that's so interesting about these World Cups. You have only two classical games. In case it's a tie, you move on to the tie breaks, and then we play two games with shorter time control, 25 minutes plus 10 seconds per move. Also, these two games ended in a draw, so we're moving to the 10 plus 10 section. And the first game there, game 5 of their match, also ended in a draw. This is game 6. And you know, with the shorter time control, you know that players are taking more risks. And let's have a look at the following fireworks. Erigaisi opens the game with the move 1d4, and after knight f6, he plays the move bishop g5. It's a rare guest at the highest level nowadays, the Trompovsky variation. It's a playable option, of course. You're putting pressure on that knight, but after knight to e4, black is counterattacking the bishop, and the bishop will have to move again. Bishop went back to f4. Black goes d5. Now you can think, okay, white wasted the tempo moving first with the bishop and then go back to f4. But after the move f3, also this knight from e4 will be kicked out and it goes back to f6. So both sides have wasted some time with the development of their pieces. And also what should be understood is that by playing the move f3, although you gain the tempo, your knight can no longer be developed to that square. White goes knight c3, and Erigaisi is an expert in this line with white. He has played it in quite a number of games already, and Azarov played here the move a6. That's a reasonable option. Always should be ready for knight b5 ideas when the bishop and knight may potentially attack that pawn on c7. But there's also another idea which soon will become clear. White goes e4. So he's occupying the center, and obviously if black would take the pawn, this is like a dream come true. Two fantastic pawns in the center. You can place your knight on f3, looking great. So black is not interested trading off that pawn, and instead plays here the move e6. So now it basically looks like a strange French with the pawns on e4, d4 versus pawns on e6 and d5. And interestingly, Erigaisi played it already in the third game of their match. He played against Azarov the move knight ge2. It's an interesting developing move. On the other hand, you're obstructing your bishop, and it's not that clear if this is what you want to do, because if black would have played here the move b5, you see that the knight on c3 doesn't look too great at all. This was, of course, prepared between these two games, and therefore Erigaisi decides to deviate with the move queen to d2. Black goes b5, intending to challenge the knight on c3. Very aggressive play by black as well. And, well, if you do take the pawn on d5, the idea is to play first the move b4, intermediate move. And if the knight goes away, you're ready to take back with a knight on d5. Things are looking okay for black. But Erigaisi instead played the principled move e5, closing the center, attacking the knight. Knight goes back to d7. And now, okay, it looks very much like a French, like black is ready to challenge the center with c5 and knight c6. And white needs to take care of these pawns. And in fact, the bishop on f4 is not a great piece at all. Therefore, the bishop goes to g5. And one of the ideas is that if black would play your bishop e7, bishops will be swapped. And now you can move your pawn to f4, enabling the knight to come into f3. And this is maybe slightly better for white. This is a pleasant position. But Azarov keeps on playing here more pawn moves. Plays the move f6, attacking the bishop. E takes f6. And now you may think maybe knight takes f6, trying to activate the knight, but that leaves you with a hole on e5, and maybe later on, if this pawn is no longer there, you can try to get a knight into to e5. That's not what black wanted. Decided to recapture with a g-pawn, attacking the bishop. Every tempo matters, and it's pretty much in the spirit of the French opening, so that you try to destroy white's pawn formation, and later on, these pawns, they can potentially become really strong. But for now, of course, also the black king is a little bit shaky in the center. Its pieces are not developed yet. Various options where the bishop can go to, can drop back to e3 or h4, for instance. But Erigaisi goes for bishop h6, offering the exchange of bishops. And of course, it would be nice for the queen to come over there. But black decides, okay, I don't want to exchange the bishops. Although an alternative here is c5, continuing with the aforementioned plan of trying to destroy the center, trying to get out the knight to c6. If this pawn on d4 will not be there later on, it will be easier for black to get in the move e5. But okay, that's for later. It didn't happen, so it's not for later at all. Bishop e7 was played, and frankly, I don't like this move. I feel this king is not looking great, and especially if white would have played here the move f4. I think that's the key idea, to prepare bishop e2, threatening bishop h5 with checkmate. Look at these bishops. This is a very unusual mating pattern. The king can't go anywhere, but also it's more about the rearrangement of your pieces. You would like to get your knight into play, and if you just ensure that all the pieces join play, white probably can just claim a very nice advantage. Didn't happen. Castling queenside was played. Black played the move c5. Very ambitious move. And now I would think, okay, let's get a piece into the game. Let's go for knight ge2, for instance, so that if you do take, you're able to recapture with your knight. But instead, Erigaisi had a different plan with castling queenside. He wanted to get his rook over to the e-file. So rather than getting these pieces into play, I thought the rook was doing reasonably well on d1. He moves the rook from d1 to e1. Now black goes b4, questioning that knight on c3. And this is also a difficult moment for white. What are you going to do with it? Knight, there are various moves to consider. You don't really want to go back to e2 because that hinders the other pieces. If you go back to d1, you think, okay, maybe that knight is looking ugly. Where is it going? Takes a lot of time. If you play knight a4, okay, the knight is at the side of the board, but okay, it still covers some squares, and who knows, maybe later on the knight can rejoin play again. Very interesting option. Erigaisi played here knight b1. And I don't think the knight is particularly happy here. It's sort of supporting the king, but it's really badly placed, and it will take a long time before it comes back into play. Now, key moment, black missed a big opportunity. Could have taken that pawn on d4. Very simple move. It's not really clear why he didn't go for it, but I assume that, okay, if white takes with the queen back on d4, you got to be careful. Pawn on e6 might be hanging, but you go knight c5, protecting the pawn with both your knight and bishop. Maybe knight c6 can be played. And your minor pieces, they are very nicely guarding your pawns. Your king is also safe. If your pawns are well supported, your king is also safe, as white is not having too many attackers nearby. Maybe it could be that after c takes d4, white had considered to take on e6 with the rook. Looks very bad now. White's rook looks very dangerous. Black's pawns are horrible, but there is this move knight e5, and the rook all of a sudden is trapped in the middle of the board. Doesn't have a good square to go to, will be forced to give up the exchange as the bishop attacks the rook. So that looks really good. Missed opportunity by black. Instead, there followed knight c6, also an interesting move. Now the idea was that after rook takes e6, black played the move knight takes d4, attacking the rook in a different way, but now the rook can still come back to e1, and black goes knight e5. So now the knight replaces that e-pawn, trying to keep the file close so that the black king is relatively safe. And one of the ideas is that if white would play here f4 to kick that knight out, there is knight g4. That's a very good move. You're attacking the bishop. If the bishop goes to g7, there is rook g8. The bishop is trapped. There are no tactics with bishop takes f6 trying to exploit the pin on the e-file, as the knight still protects the f-pawn as well. Bishop is trapped, and therefore white doesn't have the chance yet to kick that knight away from the e-file. Instead, knight e2 was played, hoping to trade off another very important piece. Imagine black's knights are no longer there. The white pieces do gain more access towards the black king. And of course, if you take on e2, that would only help white to complete its development. f4 is on the agenda, trying to move that knight away. Bishop h5 will come. That's not what black should do. Azarov played an excellent move here, ignored white's idea, played bishop f5, which is a very interesting pawn sacrifice. So that after knight takes d4, c takes d4, queen takes d4, this bishop does exert quite a bit of pressure against that pawn on c2. And there are a lot of things to consider here. Who is attacking whom here? That's the big question. A move like rook c8 really springs to mind, but there are really complicated lines. If you defend your pawn on c2 by playing c3, black is going to consolidate its position and black is doing fine. But maybe rook takes e5 is here. Beautiful exchange sacrifice. Things are getting out of hand. And one interesting computer line I'm going to show you briefly is f takes e5, queen takes e5. Now the bishop and the rook, they are both hanging. You can first take the pawn on c2 with check because the bishop defends the rook, king d1. But okay, if the bishop is hanging, then maybe later the rook will also be hanging. Rook c6 back, attacking the bishop on h6, queen takes h8, king d7. Now you can exchange the queens and white is a piece up. But look, now the bishop on h6 and the knight on b1, they are both hanging. So black will regain the pieces and this is an incredibly sharp position. Interesting option, but even better for black would have been here to first play the move queen d7 to protect the bishop. It's such an important strategy in very sharp positions to make sure that your pieces remain protected. Now these sort of tactics, they don't work. After rook takes e5, f takes e5, queen takes e5, only the rook is hanging. You can move the rook away because black is having everything under control. The exchange sacrifice doesn't work. Another line is if you try to move that knight away from the center with the move f4, then the key idea is to ignore the threat. Play here rook to c8, intending to take, but after f takes e5, you actually don't want to take with the rook, you want to get there with your queen, threatening checkmate. All of a sudden it's black who has a dangerous attack now. If you play b3 to deal with the mating threat, it's queen takes a2, another mating threat is there. If you would play bishop d3 to close the diagonal, it's rook takes c2, bishop takes c2, queen takes c2, black is giving checkmate. The alternative is to try to run away with your king, but after queen takes c2, king can only go to e3, it's bishop c5, black wins the queen and it's game over. Now, I'm not saying this is a forcing line at all, but you see that it's not easy for white to generate threats himself, while the knight on b1, the bishop on f1, the rook on h1, they are out of play and black's threats are really strong. It didn't happen. It's a rapid game, probably they were not calculating all these lines, but definitely they were considering such ideas. Queen c7 was played in the game, threatening checkmate. White played the move c3, but now the difference is also that the pawn on d5 is still hanging. That can still be protected with a move like rook d8. That's a sensible move. You can also castle queenside. May look strange to castle queenside when there are no more pawns on a7, b7 and c7. It's a razor sharp position. Anything can happen. Of course, black was struggling here with the question what to do with its king. And decided, okay, the king is relatively safe on f7. And it's actually true. If white would capture with the queen on d5, there is bishop e6 and black is okay. The rooks are connected and very likely there are possibilities to take over the initiative and create threats against the white king. But king f7 is a serious mistake. It does allow the move f4. First, you're putting pressure on that knight, but probably black had been counting here on the move he played, knight g4. The knight is safe and it's attacking the bishop. After queen takes d5, check, it's a double attack. Now the big difference, because the knight is no longer on e5, black cannot block the check with bishop e6 because the queen can just take it. That's the difference. The line is not blocked. Black played here the move king g6 instead, solving the check, protecting the bishop, That's what he had been thinking about. But can you see what is the key move here? How does white finish off the game with a remarkable tactical shot? 1, 2, 3, go, boom! Queen takes f5, queen sacrifice, and black resigned. After king takes f5, the point is it's bishop to d3 with checkmate. Bishop gives check, rook covers the e-file. The queen cannot come back to g6, while the bishop on h6 also protects the pawn on f4, covers the g5 square. Very cute mating pattern. Now, you may think, could black have played something else? Well, you can take on h6, you capture the bishop, but there is queen takes g4 and white is a piece up. White will consolidate its position with an extra piece. That's not a fair battle. So therefore, Erigaisi won this game, won this mini match thanks to a beautiful queen sacrifice. What an amazing finish. It's something you don't see too often. But in this World Cup, we have seen so many incredible games already. I hope you're enjoying it so far. At least I do. And I'll be back very soon with more excitement from this spectacular event. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel because we are getting 1,000 subscribers before the end of the tournament. Bye bye.